preparing. We can start. Okay. Okay. I'm going to admit people.
Okay.
Vale.
Yes.
Hey, hola.
Hola. Amos, how are you?
Okay, how's it going? Good seeing you.
It's nice to see you. Where
Hi,
are
my
you?
friend. Hello.
Hey.
Are you in Israel?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes. I already thought this was 9 a.m. because I miscalculated the time difference. And then this morning I woke up and I'm like, okay, let's connect. And oops, it's in 14 hours. How have you been?
Great. We're doing well. So yeah.
Well, let me just raise the volume. I'm trying to set up I have headphones, but I don't seem to be able to set them up. I don't know why. I'm gonna try and set up my headphones. Valentina.
Okay.
Bettina Shalom. Come say hi. Denise is here too.
Okay. So
Let me wait just a second.
I think it's at night, right? It's very late in Israel.
It's 11 p.m.
Whoa,
Wow.
too late for you.
It's always too late for me.
Very, very grateful for your presence. Well, it's a real cafe now.
So
Cafe between friends.
Yeah. Just for everybody that's online right now, we're going to wait a couple more minutes before we start to give people to link and join. I'll just wait one more minute and then I'll start with the introductions. So I think, okay, I think I'll start. I just saw that you're starting to record. Welcome, everybody. I'm Valentina Ferretti, and I'm president of AFO. And welcome to the AFO Cafés that are informal science conversations that we have about birds once every month. And because AFO Cafés are open to the public, I'm just going to briefly introduce AFO so that those of you that don't know Association of Field Ornithologists will get to know it. AFO is a member-based organization that's dedicated to the study and conservation of birds and their natural habitats. And we actually view ourselves as the bridge between the professional and amateur ornithologists. And we do have a strong focus on Latin America through outreach, scientific meetings, and grant programs. And I'm going to ask everyone to, except for the speakers, to turn off the cameras and their microphones so that, because this is a meeting, is not a webinar, and so that we don't interrupt the speakers. Thank you. And AFO was founded in 1922 as the New England Bird Banding Association. And so that means that next year, it's our 100-year anniversary. And we are going to have our celebration in Massachusetts, actually. That's our founding state. So please save the date. We're going to have at the AFO meeting in October 10 to 13 in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and the venue is Hotel 1620. So we will soon be posting that on our website and online. So, but you can start saving the date for that. And I just want to tell you, as I said, we have monthly AFO cafes, and our next cafe actually is going to be moderated by one of our council members, Allison Jackson, who is the AFO chair for undergraduate outreach. And it's going to be a panel discussion on demystifying grad school, how to find, apply to, and get into graduate school. So if you are a professor and you have students, undergrad students that are interested in pursuing grad studies in the US, just tell them to sign up for this cafe because it's going to be interesting and we'll have some information for them. Our cafes are sponsored by AVNet Research Supplies, and I'm going to let Patrick introduce AVNet.
Thank you, Valentina. I'm very happy to be here representing AVNet, which is AFO's research supply arm. We provide researchers with essential tools and supplies, including misnets, banding supplies, and an ever-growing product list. We always love to hear from researchers about their needs and solutions for field biology. And we're very happy to be able to support the AFO Café, which has already provided some excellent talks. And today's talk is going to be fantastic. I think it's so important to bridge, on the ground research with conservation planning and efforts. And that's something that AVNet really enjoys supporting and is happy to be a part of. Thanks so much, Vale. And please be in touch with us at AVNet and follow us on social media.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. So I'm going to introduce the speakers today. Bettina Mahler, Melina Atencio, and Alicia de la Colina are going to be talking about a successful conservation plan for the endangered Yellow Cardinal. Dr. Bettina Mahler is a researcher at the Ecology, Genetics, and Evolution Institute of Buenos Aires. That's CONICET, our National Research Institute in Argentina. She got her biology degree from the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, as well as her PhD, during which she studied evolution, plumage, functional morphology in doves and pigeons in the Argentinian Museum of Natural Science, working with Pablo Dubara. She then moved to the University of Buenos Aires and slightly switched gears to the field of avian molecular ecology. And her research now centers on the use of next generation sequencing in studies of birds, bird ecology and behavior, with particular emphasis in species conservation, as we will hear today. Dr. Alicia de la Colina also got her biology degree from the University of Buenos Aires and her PhD at the same institution under the supervision of Bettina and Juan Carlos Reboreda to study host specificity in parasitic shiny cowbird females. But after this, she decided to pursue her passion for conservation at Fundación Temaiken, where she is part of the Department of Conservation, Education, and Research, and she is the chair of the Yellow Cardinal project at Fundación Temaiken. And last but not least, Melina Atencio is a graduate student at the University of Buenos Aires, working under Bettina Mahler's supervision, where she is studying the reintroduction success of recovered yellow cardinals. So with that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit how it's going to work. So I asked you all to turn off your cameras and microphones. At the end of the talk, you can turn on your cameras again, and the speakers are going to be answering questions. The idea is that we will have a friendly, informal conversation about their work. So you can raise your hands, or if you're on Zoom, or if you're on YouTube, you can actually post your questions on the YouTube channel, because one of us is going to be reading them and answering them live. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let the speakers begin.
Thank you, Vale. I think Ali will now start sharing. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting us to AFO Café. We are happy to tell you about our project on conservation for the yellow cardinal. I will present you a little bit about the species. I will tell you a little bit about the species, and after I introduce the species, Alicia and Meli will tell you a little bit more about the conservation project itself. So we are working with this beautiful bird, the yellow cardinal. We are working with the species since 2010, and these are the agencies that funded our research from that time on. And some generalities of the species. Ali? It's a sexually dimorphic species. As you can see, the male is at the left is beautifully colored yellow, and the female on the right is grayish. And it's a monogamous species where you can find the pairs along the reproductive season. And it is a very territorial species. And this is relevant for one of the threats I will tell you about in a couple of minutes. But males actively defend their territories during the reproductive season. This species is distributed along the espinal ecoregion. As you can see, it looks like a little bit like a savanna. So this species can be found in southern Brazil, Uruguay, and in Argentina, where this habitat forms a sort of a sea. And there is an estimation that there are approximately 2,000 individuals left in Argentina, 300 in Uruguay, and just 50 in the wild in Brazil. These are estimations that were done like 10 years before, and so we don't have a really accurate number of individuals, but these are the rough estimations of the population that is left. So what are the threats that this species is facing? The first one is habitat loss due to transformation, particularly for agricultural activities. As you can see, when the soil is used for agriculture, the habitat is modified completely, so the species loses the breeding substrate because the trees disappear. But we did not find that there is a problem with cattle ranching. So when there is cattle ranching along the espinal ecoregion, the cardinals can perfectly coexist with this use of the soil, but not when we find agricultural activities. So everywhere where the habitat was transformed for agriculture, the species is not found anymore. So, but cattle ranching is not a problem for the species, as we could determined with our studies in the last years. The second threat this species is facing is the illegal capture for wildlife trade. And as I told you before, this species is very territorial, and this is something that makes it very easy to catch. So as you can see on the right, there is a cage that is typically used to catch the yellow cardinals. We have a double top, and on the bottom part, the hunters bring a cardinal that they have in captivity. And once this cardinal is in the natural habitat, it starts singing, and all the cardinals that are nearby just come flushing down to the cage to attack this cardinal. And once they get inside this cage, on the top, it gets closed, and you can get the cardinal caught very, very, very easily. So there is a lot of captures, mainly of males, because it's the easier sex to catch, and not only because of that, but also because it's the more conspicuous sex because of the plumage, and it also sings. So there, in some parts of the distribution, there is a lack of males. What gets us to the third threat this species faces, that with this lack of males, females hybridize with the males of the common yucca finch. There you can see a picture of one hybrid of both species. And these hybrids are found mainly in the southern part of the distribution, where the common yucca finch reproduces, because it's a migratory species that reproduces at this part of the distribution of the yellow cardinal. And the last threat that the yellow cardinal is facing is brood parasitism by the shiny cowbird. So shiny cowbirds are brood parasites that lay their eggs in nests of many, many species, including the yellow cardinal. And where the shiny cowbird is very abundant, you can have a great load of parasitic eggs in the nests of the yellow cardinals. So at the picture on the right, you can see 3 cardinal eggs and 1 shiny cowbird egg. But on the left, top left, you can see that there are many shiny cowbird eggs. But the problem is not only that the chicks can compete, but also that the shiny cowbird has a particular behavior that when it lays the eggs, it punctures the eggs that are already in nests. And when these eggs get pecked by the cowbirds, they come unviable, and the yellow cardinals throw them out of the nest. So where the abundance of the shiny cowbirds is very high, you have a loss of a lot of yellow cardinal eggs because of this behavior of the shiny cowbirds. So because of all these threats and the declination of the population, the species was categorized as endangered by the IUCN. And not only because of the reduction of the population, of the decline of the population, but also because of the threats that have not ceased, particularly the trapping for the illegal wild rat traffic. So having seen these problems the species is facing, we started to work on different projects. The first one was to identify the current areas of distribution of the species. Where is the species still left? Where did it disappear because of habitat transformation or because of extraction from the natural habitat? The second project was to study population structure and to see how the remaining bird populations, remaining populations of the yellow cardinal throughout its distribution behave. Are they isolated or are they still connected? And the third one was to define a conservation strategy for the species to reverse this tendency of declination that we are seeing. So for our first project, we carried out censuses from 2015 to 2018, led by Aves Argentinas, by the NGO, where we went to different localities throughout the distribution of the species through the Espinal ecoregion. And what we found was that in some areas, there was presence of cardinals, but in some areas, we didn't find any. So as you can see, we have like spots on the eastern, northeastern part of the distribution, on the center and on the south. But between these areas, we have areas with lack of cardinals. So having found these three different areas with presence of cardinals, we asked ourselves if these populations, these three populations that we found, were structured genetically in the first place. So we analyzed blood samples. We took blood samples in the field, and we analyzed two markers, mitochondrial markers and microsatellite markers. So maybe, I hope you can see it, but on the left, you can see some pie charts. And when we analyzed this mitochondrial markers, what we found is that in the western part of the distribution, one variant, the green one, the green haplotype, was very, very frequent. And in the eastern part of the distribution, that includes not only eastern Argentina, but also Uruguay, we found that the yellow haplotype was very, very frequent. So we find a really significant difference in genetic variance between Western and Eastern populations. And then when we analyzed microsatellites, we also found a differentiation between the northern and the southern population of the western side of the distribution. As you can, these markers are more variable than mitochondrial markers, and because of this and its way of inheritance, it shows us more recent divergence than what we found for the mitochondrial markers. But to summarize the information both markers give us, we could define three genetically distinct populations that we defined as three management units. And after having this differentiation that we found in genetic markers, we asked ourselves if these populations also differ or are also structured in behavioral aspects, in their behavior, particularly in their vocalizations. So we analyzed the vocalizations of the species for these different populations. And I don't know how familiar you are with these sonograms, where you can see the song in time, and where every one of these lines you see are notes. So there are different notes that can be ascending, descending, and now we can listen maybe to two songs where you can see that they are a little different. Okay, now the other one. Thank you, Ali. So these differences that we hear and that we see on the sonogram, how can we describe them? So the sonograms, you can measure different variables as maximum frequency, minimum frequency, duration of the note, duration of the song, duration of the interval between notes. And with all these variables measured, we can have a quantitative value for the song. And if we put this value if we see this value in the graph that I'm showing you, you can see that the songs are distributed differently in the space. So, and we can see that the songs of the individuals of one regions are similar to each other and different to the songs of individuals coming from another region. So is this difference that we see between songs, is it relevant to the birds? Do they recognize these songs as different? Do they respond differently to these songs? And well, we made some experiments. I don't have a slide for that, but we made some experiments in the field. And we saw that individuals from one area respond more intensively to the songs coming from their area and not so strongly to songs coming from different areas. So this is something that is relevant for the species and for the populations itself. So with this information we gathered, we wanted to define a conservation program for the species. And what we thought is that having this huge confiscations or these huge captures from the wild that are afterwards confiscated from the governmental agencies, we wanted to create a project that works with these birds and try to get them back to their natural habitat. So we started to work with different actors in this project that we call the Yellow Cardinal Alliance, that can go through all the conservation plan, starting from the confiscation of the animals by the wildlife governmental agencies. These animals are then deposited at the recovery center, where they are recovered sanitarily and behaviorally, but Alicia will tell you more about that just in a few minutes or in a few seconds. And we, at our lab, we analyzed, based on these genetic differences that we found between the different populations, we assigned the origin of the yellow cardinals that are confiscated, because these confiscations mainly take place in Buenos Aires city, that is far away, or, well, it is not in the Espinal ecoregion. So we don't know where these animals come from. And so we analyzed the molecular markers that we already analyzed for the population for these animals, and based on the characteristics of these markers in these animals, we can assign them to their population of origin. After we assign them and after they are recovered, we release them back into their natural habitat. And after that, we carried out a radio tracking post-release monitoring to see if this reintroduction was successful. And Melina will tell you more about that just in a while. So this is then the conservation project we are working on for a couple of years. And well, Alicia will tell you more about it.
Thank you, Bettina. Well, I'm Alicia de la Colina from Fundación Temaiken, Conservation Department. And I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to share with all you our work about the reintroduction of Yellow Cardinal recovered from wildlife trafficking. This alliance began with, the articulation between these three organizations, the University of Buenos Aires, the NGO Aves Argentinas, that is an alliance, it's allied with BirdLife International, and Fundación Temaiken, or Temaiken Foundation. We set ourselves this main goal: prevent the extinction of the yellow cardinal, mitigating the impact of wildlife trafficking on the species. Fundación Temaiken is a conservation organization with three powerful tools as a strategy. We have a zoo at Temaiken Biopark. We have a wildlife rescue center and our natural reserve called Osonunu. So is this from our wildlife rescue center that we work on the rehabilitation of confiscated yellow cardinals, because the mission of our rescue center is reintroduce wild fauna victim of emergencies, mascotry, and trafficking. In this video, you will see our first experience working with the yellow cardinals. It was in 2017, including animals with more than 10 years
para empezar el proceso de recuperación,
of captivity.
que consiste en una primera evaluación de un médico veterinario junto con personal especializado para ver en qué condiciones llegó ese animal, y después se le va a hacer una limpieza para tratar de estabilizar estos parásitos que normalmente tienen los animales. En esta situación de estrés que están viviendo, se los aloja en un recinto adecuado donde pueden empezar a ejercitar.
El rol que nosotros hacemos es prepararlos para una pronta liberación, que los animales pasen por un proceso de musculación donde se los evalúa con el trabajo de las voluntarias, se evalúa que tengan un estado bueno de musculación y capacidad de vuelo, que puedan alimentarse bien, que tengan interacciones positivas.
Las tareas que realizamos como voluntarias es monitorear los comportamientos de los individuos. Lo principal es ver que los individuos estén aptos para ser liberados, que es la finalidad del proyecto. Después, aparte, se observan si hay algún otro tipo de comportamiento que esté fuera de lo normal y así saber cómo manejar ese individuo en particular.
Cuando los animales ingresaron a Fundación Temaiken, se les hace un chequeo médico, pero además también se le extrae una muestra de sangre, se deriva a un grupo de la Universidad de Buenos Aires, que es el Laboratorio de Ecología y Comportamiento Animal, y ellos analizan y nos determinan cuál es el origen geográfico. Y la sugerencia sería liberar cada uno de estos animales según su lugar de origen. Como es un animal tan territorial y tan agresivo, tuvimos que planearla y hacer una liberación de machos cada, por ejemplo, 1 kilómetro para poder aumentar su probabilidad de que les vaya bien en su hábitat, darles una chance de que tengan sus territorios.
En esta próxima etapa lo que vamos a hacer es un seguimiento de los cardenales usando radiotelemetría. Parte de ellos fueron instrumentados con radiotransmisores. Vamos a seguirlos con unas antenas y vamos a ver cuál es su comportamiento una vez liberados después de un tiempo de cautiverio.
Lo excepcional de este programa es que tenemos desde el principio de la historia hasta el final de la historia. Well, after this great first experience with the release of these animals, we began to receive more and more animals from new seizures. And these animals confiscated by government agencies are received at CRED, our Wildlife Rescue Center, and held in quarantine. Upon admission, the health protocol is activated. This health and handle protocol was designed and improved over the years. Veterinarians perform clinical exams and treatment if necessary. We put colored rings, all under anesthesia, following the international standards of animal welfare. The protocol include take blood samples for molecular analysis, DNA test, and diagnosis, of course. And then the animals are transferred to a special sector of the CRED. Here, there is the yellow side. This sector has many cages, as you see. Each cage has 8 cubic meters space for each individual. Remember that the males are very, very aggressive, so they cannot share a cage. We have to put one male in each cage. Sometimes we can put together maybe some female with a male or 2 juveniles, but in general, it's not possible to put together these animals. So they need a lot of space. Also, the feeding and enrichment protocols are implemented for the welfare of the animals, including some glass, fundamental. And since 2018, after the first release event and the Melina World Monitoring Program, which he will tell you about it later in this talk, I don't want to say any spoiler, but we have to implement the work with the behavioral aspects of the bird in the process of recovering animals especially from animals from trafficking. It was completely necessary. So with the collaboration of our a bird of prey ambassador of the Temaiken Biopark, trained under falconry, well, here is Seju, our hero. Well, the idea with this anti-predator test is to expose each cardinal to the feeling of danger, under control, of course, and evaluate the response. So the person, the zookeeper, give instruction to a trained hawk to fly directly to the cardinal in order to analyze the escape behavior. So if the cardinal respond with a proper escape behavior, the animal, we said, is ready to release. But if it not respond properly, it's not for the release for the moment, right? We have to make another stage. The second stage, in order to get a better response, we add to the experiment a recorded alarm cardinal call, yeah, at the same time that the trained hawk flies directly to a yellow bite, and it beat it. So in this way, the result of this test, the yellow cardinal receive a combination of stimulus to provoke this desired escape behavior. And we repeat this test until we get a good answer. And now you can see in this video, it happens very, very fast. Let me show you again, please. Here you are. I don't know if you see my, oh, sorry. here you are, it's not possible to see, I think. Here is the cardinal, right? Very calm on a perch. And now when the hawk is flying directly, you will see the behavior, very, very crazy flight, right? It's a very good response. It's an example of a very good response. But now, since 2020, because of the pandemic, we have to change this training a bit to make it faster and more efficient. So we do now is to this kind of experiment where in this case you will see a first stage as a control with just a person approaching to the cardinals, and they respond with quite unquiet but not so nervous. It's like just few movements and no more than that. 5 minutes later, we put alarm call at first, and secondly, the hawk is approached, but on a glover, right? On a person. And now you can see the behavior of the birds. They respond very nervous and quiet, very active, very active. So this is the kind of response that I'm looking. So when the animals are ready and have passed the test, our is placed on is positive release very means
sorry, I'm going to interrupt a second. I don't know if it's your Ali, your internet or what, but I think you're breaking a little bit. Is it possible?
Can you hear me?
No?
Can I to stop sharing?
We can't hear you very well.
Okay, maybe if I off my ear and can you? No.
Not very well.
Maybe Meli can try with the next part of the presentation when she will present what happens with the monitoring program. Maybe we can hear Meli well.
Yeah, sure. But can you move towards my slides, please?
Okay, I can.
I can hear you well now.
Oh, we can hear. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't touch anything. Well, internet service. Do you know? Oh, well, always happen. Okay. Can you hear me right now? It's okay.
Yes.
Can I continue? Okay. Perfect. When we arrive to the site, to the release site, we wait a while to reduce the stress of the trip, of course, for the animals and for us, of course. And 15 minutes before the liberation, we feed the animals. In this way, we were able to control the anxiety about food for the animals. And to finish my part, I want to show you a video for the latest release, which despite being in the middle of the pandemic, many stakeholders of the community and the authorities were able to participate
it's a very good news because it's possible get to the project a lot of visibility in the media and social networks. And this is the end of this part of the presentation. Well, it's always very emotional to live this moment. It's very, very nice. Well, now it's time to Melina.
Thank you, Ali. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So right now I'm going to talk to you about the main results that we got from the monitoring of the released Yellow Cardinals that took place in La Pampa province in Argentina from 2017 to 2019. Since many of the released Yellow Cardinals were radio tagged, we were able to carry out this monitoring with radio telemetry. Next, Ali, please. Thank you. So regarding survival, we had a total of 36 radio tagged Yellow Cardinals, and we were able to follow 27 of them in the field. We think that the remaining 9 that we weren't able to follow probably flew farther away from the study site. We had 14 dead or predated individuals and a percentage of predation of almost 41%. And the most shocking part about this predation events that almost all of these predatory events took place within the first 2 weeks post-release. But the good news, Ali, please. Next one. Thank you. The good news is that both in 2018 and in 2019, we recite individuals from previous releases, meaning that in 2018, we saw individuals that we released in 2017, and in 2019, we saw individuals from the 2017 and 2018 releases, meaning that these individuals survived 1 or 2 years after they were released. Next one, please. Thank you. So moving on to the reproductive biology, we had individuals that were able to form reproductive pairs. We had reproductive pairs between released individuals, and we also had reproductive pairs between released and wild individuals. Here we would have the female would always be the wild one, and the male would always be the released one. So moving on to the reproductive attempts. Well, on 2019, I was able to remain in the study site for 3 months, which encompasses almost all of the reproductive season for this species. And I was able to follow 15 nests from 9 different reproductive pairs. And what I found was that all nests were parasitized by brood parasite Molothrus bonaerensis, or shiny halberd. And none of the nests were successful. So we had, for this season and for this particular study site, 0 recruitment for Yellow Cardinals. We had no Yellow Cardinal chicks. These were really bad news, but at the same time, it worked as a wake-up call to pay more attention to the release side and really consider brood parasitism as a really important threat for Yellow Cardinals. Next one, please. Hello, next one, please. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello, hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Frozen.
Oh no.
It's frozen. Okay. I passed maybe 3 slides. I can
were you
go.
able to hear me before? I'm sorry.
Yes, I can hear.
Melody, you can try putting up the video.
What about now? Can you see the slide?
We can see the slide, but I think we lost Melina.
Yeah, I think Meli left us.
Okay.
Probably she's coming back soon, I think.
She told us that she has problem with the connections.
Yeah.
There she is.
Yes.
Here I am. Sorry. Oh, what happened? Wait, hold on. I'm just, okay. So I don't know where I left. Were you able to hear the?
I think it's in this slide about the evaluation of the reintroduction success.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now I want to talk to you about this study that we carried out in 2018 and in 2019. So when it comes to reintroductions, we have to think about what are the main factors that could affect the outcome of or the success of the reintroductions. And some of these factors may involve characteristics regarding the release site, such as habitat suitability, threats, the presence of an existing population. We also have the translocation protocols, which involve handling, transport, release method. And we also have characteristics regarding the animals per se, the individual's characteristics, such as health condition, age, and time spent in captivity for the released individuals. And so an individual factor that has been gaining a lot of attention for the past few years is animal personality. And so we asked ourselves, how can this individual factor, animal personality, play a role in Yellow Cardinals reintroductions? So when we talk about animal personality, we're referring to behavioral differences between individuals that are consistent in time and that are correlated in different contexts and situations. Some of the main studied personality traits are aggressiveness, sociability, activity, exploratory behavior, which refers to the individual's response to a novel situation. And this could be a novel object or a novel environment. And risk-taking behavior, which refers to an individual's response to a potential dangerous situation or a risky situation. And so when we talk about personality, we also have to mention behavioral syndromes. These refer to personality traits that can correlate with each other at the individual level. And a well-studied behavioral syndrome is the reactive-proactive axis. This is a syndrome that has been studied in birds in the past. And it basically describes a continuous axis where we can place on one side of the axis the reactive individuals, which are characterized by being less aggressive, having a low exploratory behavior, and being more risk averse. And on the other side of the axis, we have the proactive individuals that tend to be more aggressive, have a higher exploratory behavior, and be less risk averse in comparison to the reactive individuals. So next, please, thank you. Keeping all of this in mind, we decided to study animal personality in Yellow Cardinals and how this could be playing a role in the Yellow Cardinals reintroductions. So basically what we did was carry out a set of behavioral tests to characterize exploratory behavior and risk-taking behavior. These tests were carried out at Temaiken's Recovery Center before the releases. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about these tests. First, we have the novel environment test. Next one, Ali, please. And for this test, basically what we did was take each one of the birds separately in a transport cage, and we would just take it to an experimental arena, which is what would be the novel environment for the bird. And we would record a series of variables that would describe the individual's response to this novel environment. We recorded and we measured the mobility of the animals, the number of hops and flights they made throughout the cage, the number of quadrants they visited, because the cage was separated into 4 different quadrants, and also the number of quadrant changes, in a way to be able to describe this exploratory behavior. Then we also we carried out a neophobia test. Next one, please.
Yes.
Good. Here, this experimental setup consisted in, we placed the cardinal's regular food plate with its regular diet on top of a green cloth. The green cloth would be the novel object for the cardinal, and we recorded the time it took each and one of the cardinals to approach the plate and eat from the plate in presence of this novel object, which is the green cloth. Next, we studied a risk-taking behavior by carrying out a started latency test. Here, the experimental setup was the same as the neophobia test, only that the green cloth had a transparent string attached to it. And so when the bird would go down and eat from the plate, we would pull on the cord, and in a way to startle the animal or scare the animal, and then we would record the time it took the bird to return to its feeding. And last but not least, we carried out, next one, please. Thank you. Which pretty much consisted in exposing each and one of the cardinals to a potential aerial predator. And we registered each and one of the cardinals' response to the predator. We recorded their mobility, how many hops and flights, etc. And so, with all of these variables, with all of the results and the scores from each and one of these tests, we carried out a principal component analysis, which pretty much summarizes all the variables into a single variable, which we called personality principal component. And basically, this variable was characterized, individuals with a high personality principal component were characterized by having a high exploratory behavior, meaning they explored the novel environment in a more active way. They also had a high response in the anti-predatory test. They had low latencies for the startle latency test and the neophobia test, meaning that they took less time to approach and eat from the plate in front of a startle or in front of a novel object. And so personality principal component, we carried out a survival analysis. And we found that the model that included this personality principal component as an explanatory variable worked better to explain survival than the null model, meaning that individuals that had these characteristics had a higher exploratory behavior and were also bolder or less risk averse, had a higher survival in the field. Next one, please. Okay, so we also studied the distance traveled from release site, and we found that yellow cardinals with a higher exploratory score in the novel environment test moved farther away from the release sites during the first 9 days post-release. And we also found that yellow cardinals that moved farther away from the release sites survived following their releases. Next one, please. So, like I said, basically we found that more exploratory. With all of this in mind, in the scenario where predation was the main cause of death for the released yellow cardinals, we hypothesized that more exploratory individuals could have an advantage in terms of survival in comparison to less exploratory individuals, since these more exploratory cardinals could have greater chances of finding more adequate habitats or refugia, and perhaps in response in pre-release anti-predatory training sessions. And that way we could overcompensate the inherent low mobility responses of less exploratory or more reactive individuals. So as we all know, environment can change spatially and temporally, and especially in the yellow cardinals distribution, we have that the intensification of agricultural activities and livestock ranching that generate habitat transformation and natural habitat loss. And so we also know that maybe personality traits that are favorable in one context may be suboptimal or not so favorable in a different context. And because of this context dependency, we recommend management efforts to maintain this behavioral variability for the released populations of rescued yellow cardinals. And lastly, our results reflected how personality is associated with short-term survival, which is linked to the individual's challenges of facing and adapting to a new environment. But we really don't know how personality could be affecting them in the long-term survival. And we also have that personality could have a significant effect on reproductive success, which is another key fitness component that should be considered when it comes to reintroduction programs evaluations. Thank you. And now, Ali, I think, close up the presentation.
For the end, we want to share with you our final numbers. Today, we can say that we recover 100 animals, and they return to the wild with less than 30% of loss by predation. It's a very low number. And we have high record of pairs and reproductive events after insertions. That is excellent news, very, very good news. Since 2015, we received 164 animals admitted to CRET, to Wildlife Rescue Center, and just only 23 deaths during the process. It's very low number for animals coming from trafficking. And right now we have almost 40 birds ready to go to the wild. Hope to release it in next September. And I think that's the end. I think we are very, very happy with these numbers. And now I think yes, thank you. It's time of questions.
Thank you very much. That was great and a lot of information. Thank you. I'm going to ask everyone, so maybe we can stop there. We can stop sharing and people can turn on your cameras so that we have a conversation and we can answer questions. And for those of you that are on YouTube, you can also post questions or write questions because we can read them here, and Melina, Bettina, and Alicia can answer your questions if you have them. And I'm just going to start with the questions as we let people ask. I'm just curious. I think that many people might be interested in conservation and management of species, and I'm just curious to know how it worked to put how the alliance got to work. Were the government agencies that were dealing with all these animals, did they contact you, or was it the other way around, that you saw the problem, you were working with the species? So how did all the process started and you got it to work to this point where you have a fairly organized system right now?
Well, that's a very good question, Vale, and I'm trying to recall how this started. Actually, I think it was actually the original idea of the genetics project was to be able to obtain the differences, the genetic differences between the populations, to use them for reintroduction of confiscated animals. And so I think after we had our first results, we contacted Alicia and the governmental agencies because they were working together already, because the governmental agencies was sending the cardinals to Fundación Temaiken. And I think we just proposed that with our information, we could assign these animals to the population of origin. And the first question was why bring them back to the population of origin and not anywhere else? And so, well, with our information on behavior, I think, and with individuals knowing their particular habitat, because the Espinal ecoregion is quite, it's a broad habitat, and it's like very dry in some parts, but it's moist in other parts. So it's not so alike. The individuals coming from a dry area are accustomed to different conditions than the ones that come from a more warm area like the northeastern part of Argentina. And I think with these arguments, they were convinced that it was a good idea to identify the population of origin, and that's how all it started.
Okay. So we have a question by Paula Garrido, but I see you, Paula, there. If you want to ask the question yourself, or I can read it too. Maybe.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I really like the presentation and the information that we share, so thank you. When I was listening to the presentation, I wanted to know if you have any idea how to deal with predation, parasitism. If you have any idea to save that eggs that are lost with the parasitism.
So I don't know, maybe I start with some idea, and then Meli and Alicia maybe can give some more ideas. So there are two different parts, maybe just working on this, on the nest, as you asked, to save these eggs. Maybe Meli or Alicia can tell you more about that. And then about the parasitism pressure. So I think it's important to mention that there are different abundances of shiny cowbirds, and in areas where there are feedlots, there are many cowbirds, and parasitism rates are really high, and there it's very difficult for the cardinals to be successful, like Meli found at her study site. But on the other hand, the last release that you saw was in another part, was in Buenos Aires province, and their parasitism rates are lower, and there was success, although there was parasitism, but there was a recruitment of yellow cardinals, as well as in Corrientes, where we saw that with low parasitism rate, you have recruitment. But thinking about working at the nets, maybe Meli can tell you a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like Betty said, right now we're focusing on paying more attention to the release site. But if the case came where we have to do something on the nests, well then there's the possibility, but it requires a lot of effort. You could, once you see that the female has laid her eggs, like you have to be really monitoring every nest to do this. Once you see she lays her eggs, you have to remove the eggs and replace them with a fake, I don't know I don't know the name in English, but it's with a material that, and you can simulate and just create a really identical yellow cardinal or whatever the species egg. And so you place the fake egg. And so then that's when the female shiny cowbird comes and punctures that fake nest, the egg. And so once the egg is punctured, you go and you switch the eggs before incubation starts, or at the moment the incubation is supposed to begin. But it's just something that requires a lot of effort. So for now, let's hope that by paying more attention to the release site, we can just avoid this parasitism problem. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ali, do you want to add anything to that?
I completely agree with Bettina and Melina. We talked many times about it, about this threat, and we think that it's easier and for the management plan, just choose another site. I think that if you can avoid this level of pressure of parasitism, I think it's easier, and we prefer to put the effort in another component of the plan, I think.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you. So, Kamal, you have a question too? Do you want to do it yourself? I don't know if
he's unmuted, but I can't hear anything. So
yeah,
I guess we could just read it.
Yeah. So he asked, how difficult was it to confiscate birds from wildlife traffickers?
Well, I work a lot with the authorities, and I have a very good, conversation with them, and they say that every time that they have to do this kind of confiscated event, start with how to say denuncia? How you say denuncia? Call of the authorities when a particular person call for the authorities because they saw some bird in cage in some home, some house, or in a shop. Always start the investigation with one call. So that is the reason that we think that it's very, very important focus on the education program, because all the investigations, all the the confiscated event start with a call for the authorities.
Thank you.
I don't know if answer the question.
Yeah, Kamal, we couldn't hear you. So if you want to type, okay, thank you. Good. Before we continue with the next question, Juan, do we have any questions on YouTube?
We don't have any question, but we have many congratulations messages, especially for Melina.
So, Melina, I think you have some fans on YouTube.
Thank you.
Well, as long as any question appears, I will tell you, but we have no real questions yet.
Okay, great. So Amos, you had a question.
Hi, yeah. So you showed that the three basic subpopulations are different genetically, and also the songs are different. So are you talking about three different subspecies or three different species? And how does those differences affect the program in terms of the conservation? Not only by choosing a different site for each bird, but maybe the different management plan or something like that.
Well, yeah, I think this is a very, very relevant question from the IUCN guidelines, because just to categorize a species, well, you need it to be defined. I don't think they categorize subspecies independently, but I'm not sure about that. In that case, if you categorize them as as subspecies, it would be very relevant, because maybe you could have different categorizations for each of these populations. However, we were not thinking about a taxonomic review of the species. I'm really not into systematics, and I really don't know what is the differentiation you need for the populations to be named as a subspecies. I don't know if anyone of the audience has more idea about that, but we were not thinking really on having like a taxonomic review of the species.
Even regardless of how you define those groups, you found 3 different groups, whatever they're called. And if their behavior might be different, their songs are different, having a different kind of adjusted plan for each group might be valuable rather than helping them all in one management program.
You mean to have like every group in a different management program?
Or maybe just adjusting, I don't know.
Yeah. Yes, well, yes, it's something we can think about or keep in mind.
Well, I think that it's necessary to, to have a lot of conversation with different authorities from different areas. There are another programs working with cardinals, and we all use wildlife rescue center. We try to use the same protocols. Fundación Temaiken share the protocols with another rescue center, and we are a very big network, networking for the cardinal. But every province, every region has its reality and works different. Right now, we are working just in Provincia de Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires province is our territory or area for the work, because it's easier. We have very good conversation and dialogue with all the stakeholders. Sometimes we can we talk with with good connection with another authorities. Sometimes not. So it's important to take account that we have 3 populations, and we have to be very careful about the origin of the birds when comes or arrive at Fundación Temaiken. So it's some animals that arrive at Fundación Temaiken, we found out that it comes from another province, and it's not possible to Fundación Temaiken release the animal in person in this area. We can, derive the animal to another rescue center. We have this kind of work in the network rescue centers.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question related to that, and I wonder, so following on Amos's question, but the 3 populations are disjunct right now, but they didn't used to be. And do we have, with the molecular markers that you used, can we tell something about their history? So how far back are we talking about? Were they 3 different populations back then, or was this a continuous population maybe that didn't have that many differences before? Maybe. I mean, can we say something about that? Is this a result of fragmentation, habitat fragmentation, or is it something that historically it might have been that way?
I think that the difference that we find between the Western and the Eastern populations, it's like an ancestral differentiation. I don't know, I think last AFO Café was a presentation of Ceci and Adrian, and they also look at differences between the eastern and the western part of different species, and they find this maybe related to the Paraná River. I don't know, maybe this can be a consequence of that as well, and we find this ancestral difference between in the mitochondrial marker that we also see in the microsatellite markers, but with the microsatellite, we also see this northern and southern differentiation in the western side, and I think that can be more recent, and that might be more related to habitat fragmentation.
Okay. Thank you. So there's a question by Tom Martin. Tom, do you want to make your question? Read it or say it out loud? Hola.
Hola. Can you
Good
hear
to
me?
see you. Yes.
Yes.
Hi, yeah.
Hola. La presentación fue muy impresionante. Felicidades y muchas gracias por todo. I wonder about landscape context. You know, you found that nest parasitism was strongly affected by the context of the landscape. And I wonder if there's a similar thing with the predation of the adults. So you found individuals that moved farther away were more successful, but I wonder if they're just finding a better landscape context. So you might want to think about where you're releasing the birds, not only in terms of nesting success, but also in terms of adult predation.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, maybe you want to tell something more about that, but definitely the release sites. Yeah, I think we should look at the predator community as well to choose the release site. I don't know what differences in predation for the first 2 weeks we found between La Pampa province, where we first released the animals, and Buenos Aires province, where Ali has more data about that. But I think within the release site, I don't think there is so much difference in predator pressure, but maybe Meli, you can tell a bit more about.
Yeah, like Betty said, I have a hypothesis that I believe that the landscape, when it comes to predation pressure, I think that it's homogeneous. However, I do have predatory data, predator data that I'm going to start exploring, which maybe it's going to give me a hint about different predator densities within the release site. I haven't explored that data yet, but it could be a possibility. However, a priori, like I believe that I think that the landscape is pretty homogeneous regarding possible predators. I'm not sure about what happens in Buenos Aires province regarding the predatory events. I think that they were also within the first few days post-release. I don't know, Ali, if you have information on that.
Yes, we had just 2 events, 2 predator events, and they were, I think, in the first 3 days, I think.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe between, yeah, we may have differences between the different landscapes regarding Buenos Aires province and La Pampa province in terms of predation. I'm not sure if within La Pampa we have differences. We can't really say that yet. We can't really say anything about that yet.
Meli,
I wonder
sorry. Let me add some little thing. There are many groups of bird watchers close to the area, and we talk with these people. They are very, very useful as citizen science. We know where is the animals, where is the yellow cardinals, because every year there are a census, as Bettina said, and these bird watchers clubs, they have the impression that there are no differences between the both areas, about the predators. So I think we have to wait, of course, the Melina study about this component specific, but at first we think that they are the same, intensity of depredation of pressure in both areas.
So I think less about the predator community per se, and more about the structure of the habitat. So you may have the same predators, but if the cover differs, and if the amount that it's broken up or open versus closed, that could have big effects. And that's what I'm wondering, are you releasing them in very open areas so that they're more exposed and then they move into more closed habitat?
Well, the last site that we made the release site, it is it's a farmer, it's a field with very sustainable protocols about the cows and the agriculture activities. It's almost protected area. They are very, very close to be a protected area. So I think that you have right that the use of the landscape has something to do with that, and I definitely prefer this last one, this new site for the release, because the use of the landscape is very, very friendly, very green practices. So definitely there are something about the landscape, definitely.
¿Puedo preguntar una más?
Okay.
Of course.
You have 3, maybe 4 genetic populations. Did you look at whether personalities differed among those populations?
No, not yet. But I am going to be studying the genetic basis of these behavioral differences that I found starting in a month. Yeah, in 1 month, I'm going to be starting with that genetic analysis. Yeah.
Buenísimo. Muchas gracias por todo.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions, I think, on the YouTube chat. We'll read those, answer those, and then, and those are the last ones.
Well, we have no questions on YouTube.
Nope.
No? Okay.
Just lots of
on
congratulations.
Our chat. Sorry, on our chat? No more. Okay, maybe I was looking at. So we don't have any more questions. Tom, do you have another question? No? Sorry, I'm looking at my phone where we have the messages if there are questions on YouTube, and obviously I looked at it later.
Oh yeah, that was a long time ago.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much. And thank you, Bettina, Melina, and Alicia. This was great. And yeah, we'll see you at the next AFO Café. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you
everyone.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks.